who know this channel will be aware that I am an avid Rocket League player, and as someone who has accumulated over 3,500 hours in the game, I think I can safely say that this game is pretty testing of a controller's functionality, and I can't really think of another game that is so physically demanding on a controller. The mechanical skills that you need to pull off in this game means that a controller needs to be at the absolute peak of responsiveness, durability, and ergonomics. So about a month ago, I picked up the Sony PlayStation 5 DualSense, not DualShock, DualSense controller, and decided to give my unbiased opinion on it. And you know it's unbiased because this channel is so small that Sony or any of its competitors would never give us any money to do anything else. Now, I'll preface this review by saying that I have absolutely no particular allegiance to PlayStation over Psyonix. I know there's a load of fanboys on either side. I'm a PC player and I see pros and cons in both. They're both fun consoles, and in my first 1,500 hours or so of Rocket League, I used an Xbox controller, and then I switched to DualShock 4 in probably around November 2018, and the reason I switched was because I had numerous Xbox controllers and they all broke on me in different ways, so I found the durability of them a little bit poor, so I wanted something a bit more durable. So I decided to give the DualShock 4 a go, and I felt that that was a lot more durable. We'll get onto the durability of this one later on. So the DualSense controller comes in at a price range of around £60, which is about $70 or 70 euros. That puts it at kind of a mid-range price in terms of a controller. Some would say that that's a bit on the steep side, but when you consider that some of the more sort of professional aimed controllers, which are in excess of £100, $100, etc., then it's not really hugely expensive. And generally, if you are looking for a good controller, you won't get one for under 40 quid or $40 or whatever, $50 or whatever it is in translation. And this is definitely a good controller. So to start off, we will just go ahead and mention how it looks. I think this controller is gorgeous and probably the prettiest looking controller I've ever seen. The controller is significantly bigger than its predecessor, the DualShock 4, which I had been using prior to this one. And instead of having the sort of grey buttons with the distinctive colours of the X, square, triangle and circle buttons, this one has gone for more clear buttons with the aforementioned colour taken away and left in grey. The touchpad is surrounded by this lovely light which, much like the light on the back of your DualShock 4, will change colour depending on which player is connected. Or if you're on PC and use DS for Windows like I do, it'll be whatever colour you select. The white shell of the DualSense is very appealing to my eye as well. My understanding is that there will be alternative colours in the future, but I'm quite happy with the white version myself. So moving on to what I probably consider to be the biggest improvement over the DualShock 4 is the USB connection. This uses a USB Type-C connection. This is fantastic. The old DualShock 4 used micro USB. A micro USB is terrible. In fact, it's probably the worst connection type I have ever witnessed. And the DS4 in particular, that port seemed to be more fragile than a piece of uncooked spaghetti. This USB-C socket on the DualSense controller feels very sturdy. I've had it for a month, I've been plugging it in and out, and I've not encountered any issues with it at all. And usually after doing that a few times on this, you'd get some cable wobble and it would just sort of sit in there a bit funny, and you could occasionally get a few disconnects, but usually that would come after a few months rather than just a month. But time will tell if it happens, but USB-C is generally considered to be a lot more durable than the micro USB. Side note, by the way, if you are using a controller in a competitive game and you're still using Bluetooth, stop doing this. Cabled is always a better option. You get much more consistent connection using a cable, and I should probably also point out that you should also make sure that your USB cable is plugged into the back of your PC and not into the front, because you'll get more input lag in the front. Ergonomically, this controller feels an awful lot better than its predecessor. It seems to fit the hand much more naturally than the DualShock 4 did, and is a similar size to that of the Xbox controller, which I really enjoyed because I really enjoyed the size of the Xbox controller, and moving to this one, it's an awful lot smaller. I always felt that Microsoft had the edge over Sony on the ergonomic design of their controllers, and to a certain element they still kind of do with the placement of the analog stick. It's a lot more comfortable to have an analog stick up where these D-pad buttons are, rather than down here and having to reach across the controller. But that being said, it's not a big reach, you can still work fine on it. This change in size, of course, does mean that it takes a little bit of an adjustment, and it can feel a little bit uncomfortable first, but since I've been using it for a month now, I'm feeling a lot more comfortable using it, and I don't feel any discomfort whilst playing anymore. The front-facing buttons all feel mostly the same as they did on the Dualshock 4, and I'm very glad about this because it's kind of a case of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And the buttons on the Dualshock controllers have always been one of the best things about them. They feel very responsive, they're nicely designed, they're nicely flat, and yeah, it just always feels a lot nicer than those on the Xbox controllers. One thing that they did add onto the front of the PlayStation controller is this little mute button for your headset. So if you've got your headset plugged into it, then you can mute it from your controller. And I just think that's an excellent touch from Sony. The shoulder buttons have been improved slightly and have been made larger, and in my opinion, definitely feel better overall. The R2 and L2 buttons have also received an adaptive trigger upgrade, which means that depending on the game you play, the controller will adjust resistance, giving you an element of force feedback. This is a feature I have not noticed whilst playing Rocket League though, so it's probably a feature that's more considered for other games. The analog sticks have an improved grip over the DualShock 4 as well, which is interesting. You can see this little texture around the edge of the sticks, which seems to have an effect on how well your thumb holds onto the stick. I would occasionally have issues with my thumb slipping off the analog stick on the DualShock 4, so it's nice that Sony are trying to improve that aspect of the controller too. One thing I'll note as well on the subject of analog sticks is that if you go to this Deadzone visualizer created by Halfway Dead, which if you haven't seen this before, I'll link it and a video explaining it in the description below. On checking this, there is pretty much zero movement on the readings at idle. And that's when I've got it set to a 0 dead zone, which means there's no stick drift yet after a month of continuous use. So this controller definitely seems to be pretty well built. And although I can't speak for all DualSense controllers, if this one is anything to go by, anyone who plays with a low dead zone should be pretty happy with this one. Durability wise, the controller feels very robust. It's heavier than the DualShock 4, which typically is a good sign when you're considering the overall strength of a controller. And as I said earlier, I've used this controller consistently for a month and no issues have occurred yet. Obviously I haven't been throwing it around the room, but you know, it's still fine. Of course, one person using one controller for 1 month isn't a particularly great sample size, and it's not exactly a great accurate representation of the DualSense controller's durability. However, it is still worth noting, this one could be a particularly great one, could just be the standard. So assuming that this is the standard, it's pretty good. And of course, especially on that USB-C port, which we know to be more durable than the micro USB. I seriously question whoever sanctioned the micro USB as a viable connection technology. It's just dreadful. Responsiveness on the controller is absolutely great. The polling rate of the DualSense is the same as the DualShock 4 and can be overclocked to 1000 Hz on the PC using some software. I'll link a video on how to do that in the description below. This is probably not hugely relevant to most people though, as obviously most people using this controller will be on PlayStation and not on PC, so the overclocking capability will not be there. The buttons and sticks, they all have the great responsiveness though, as I've come to expect with the Sony products. The sticks feel a little bit stiffer, but I think that's probably just due to it being newer. I seem to recall when I got my newest DualShock 4 controller, they felt a little bit stiffer as well. So in conclusion, I think DualSense controller is an excellent controller and is definite improvement overall on the DualShock 4, which of course was also a very good quality controller. Would I recommend that you ditch your current DS4 and pick up the DualSense immediately? No. Would I recommend you get one if your current controller breaks? Absolutely. The simple improvement of just that USB-C port is enough to warrant picking this controller up over another DualShock 4. And also, like I said earlier, the ergonomics of it and the overall feel of the controller I think are fantastic. So this would probably be the controller that I would recommend to everyone, especially given the price point. I really don't think you could pick up a better controller than this at this price. You'd probably have to pay double to get a controller remotely close to being this good. So with all that said, I hope this video was helpful to you, and if you have any more questions about the controller or Rocket League or anything else I do, please feel free to leave a comment down below. I always read and respond to all the comments, and as long as they're not just someone being an idiot. So if you don't want to leave a comment, feel free to come join me on my Twitch streams. I stream every Wednesday, Friday and Sunday, and there's a link to that along with all my other sociables. Sociables? We'll call them sociables in the description below. If you did find this video helpful, please do hit the like and subscribe buttons. Really does help me out a lot, and you'll be making me very happy to have you here. Finally, if you are also a Rocket League player or have any other Epic games and want to support me further, you can also use my creator code Goldfish in the item shop, and a small commission off your purchase will come to me. It's a great way to support me, and I'd also greatly appreciate it. So with all that said, I just wish you all the best, and we will see you on the next video. Bye!